Hello 8th graders, I'm going to be showing you how to set up your research review for the science fair in this video. The research review is basically your research into the world about the topics in your project. So your job is to go and find out what is already known about my variables and how will I organize that information so that when a judge talks to me I can sound a lot more informed than I was before. Also, the research review is useful because it's going to really help you to set up your hypothesis. If you're not sure what the effect of your IV is going to have on your DV, you should have a better idea after researching what the world already knows about your IV and DV so that you can make a better prediction. So some details about the research review. It's due on 9:30, which is a Friday, and you're going to be clicking Turn in Google Classroom to turn that in on that day. This is ideally not supposed to be a rough draft. So in a perfect world, you would be doing all of your research before writing your hypothesis and before doing your procedure. However, because it is 8th grade science class and I am a huge fan of revisions, if you need to revise something to get more points and do a better job, of course that opportunity is available to you, but I want you to do your best work first so that you can do a much stronger job on your hypothesis. Let's talk about some of the requirements. The length of this assignment is variable. So depending on whatever project that you're doing, you're going to need to do more or less research depending on what you're doing. So for example, if your dependent variable is how far did the object travel, and your independent variable is there are people who are doing like they're changing the pressure in a volleyball or something like that, and then you're going to hit the volleyball. Well, in that kind of an experiment, how far the ball went, that's a hard thing to research since you're supposed to be researching your IV and your DV separately. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to break that up, but it's a hard thing to say how long this is supposed to be, and a lot of students struggle with that. So I'm just going to say, kind of as a placeholder, it needs to be long enough that you have exhausted your questions. So let's talk about what that's going to look like. You're basically going to be asking questions along the way about like your IV and your DV, similar to the ones that are down here in the example. So in this person's example, they did the pH of soil, and they measured how that affects the growth of a plant. So in this kind of an experiment, they started with asking the question, well, all right, well, what is pH? And as they went through and they read different resources, they found out all this information about what pH is. As they were reading along, they had another question. They read about how pH can be measured. So they said for their next question, how is pH measured? And they went and found the answer to that. Your research review is just a list of questions. What is pH? How is pH measured? What is an acid? It's a list of questions that you then go and try to find the answers to. This is also going to be really helpful when you meet with a judge and they ask you things like, oh, I see you did an experiment on acids. What is an acid? Well, you can have your research review there with you. These are basically your notes so that you can have a much more informed conversation with the judge when that time comes. So let's talk about some of the ways to do this. This is the assignment straight out of Google Classroom, and I'm going to walk through some of the steps that I would go through to start this assignment. So in the very first couple of boxes, it's variable 1 research and variable 2 research. I've typed in my independent variable. So for my project, I'm going to do the types of wood for my independent variable, and I want to measure as a dependent variable their burn temperature. So in my first box, I'm going to start on my independent variable first. In my first box, I need to think up a list of questions that I could ask about types of wood. So I want to know, to start off, like, what is wood made from? I want to know what are common types of wood in Colorado. Types of wood in Colorado. And I also want to find out maybe like what are some of like the best types of firewood. So what are the best types of firewood? Now, you don't have to come up with all of your questions before you start. I'm just kind of brainstorming a list of questions before I get going so that I have something to work with. As you start doing research, you're going to come across maybe some key vocabulary words or different ideas as you're reading that are going to make you think, oh, I wonder what that is, and it's going to send you in another direction, and you'll keep adding questions to this. So I'm going to start with what is wood made of. So I'm going to go and do a quick search. What is wood made of? Straight into Google. So it pops up right away with something straight out of Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is not a reliable source, but it looks like this is really great information. It says wood is heterogeneous, hygroscopic, cellular, and anisotropic. Like, those are words I'm not really sure about, but it says it consists of cells. I know that is. And the cell walls are made of this stuff called microfibrils. So this is gold right here. This is stuff that I want to know. So the next step is, well, how do I collect this information in a way that's reliable? So I'm going to go to this site within Wikipedia, and I'm going to look for a spot where I find information that's super useful to me. And as I'm reading through this, wow, there's a lot of information. First of all, it's talking about growth rings and knots. That's not really super useful to my project. Okay, so there's something called Heartwood and Sapwood. That sounds like it might be useful if I'm going to be burning different types of wood. So as I was reading this, I've noticed that it says Heartwood is described up here, and then sapwood is described down here, and this is great stuff, but I need a source for this, because part of the assignment is to put down your sources. So if you see this little footnote right here, it says that this information came from the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is a useful source. So if I click on this, it takes me to the links down here at the bottom, and I can go to this resource to get that same information that was way up in the top of this document about heartwood and sapwood. So now I've found some information. I know that trees are made of heartwood and sapwood, so I'm going to go back to my document and I'm going to put in trees can have heartwood and sapwood, and I'm going to even ask another question about that. So that made me think, well, what is the difference between heartwood and sapwood? And I'm even going to maybe ask some questions later about how this would burn, but now I need to cite that original thing that I put in there, the part about trees can have heartwood and sapwood. So now I'm going to go back to where I found that information and click on this spot here. And so the resource is called Duramin from the Encyclopedia Britannica. So the resource is Encyclopedia Britannica. I am going to take that information, and I just clicked on that just so I can highlight the name so I don't have to type it. So Encyclopedia Britannica, I'm going to put that in, whoa, that's way too big, so I'm going to have to change the font on that also. But you get the idea. I'm going to put all of my citations right next to the information that I find, so that I'm always keeping track of where I found things. So now I'm going to keep going. I'm going to kind of clean this up a little bit, so I'm going to make my questions bold. I can still find out what more information about what wood is made from. So I'm going to go back to that same Wikipedia resource because that was pretty good. I still want to find that spot about where it was talking about the structure. Yeah, here we go. So it's a heterogeneous, I don't really get that stuff, but it's cellulose and hemicellulose impregnated with lignin. So that sounds like good stuff. I want to find out more about those things. But here's my citation right here. That came from a site called treetesting.com. So once I add that information in, I'm going to use this citation right here from treetesting.com, and I'm going to slowly populate my research with all the stuff that I find out. Once I'm done with the independent variable and I've got a good page and a half or so of all the research I can find out about types of wood, then I'm going to turn to my dependent variable and start talking about burn temperature. So again, I start off with like just questions. So what is burning? So I want to find out like what's the definition of when something burns. And I've already looked this up, so I found out that burning is when something reacts with oxygen. So I want to know, what is a reaction, since I read about how it reacts with oxygen. And maybe I might even do a little research about like what chemicals are required for burning. And I'm going to do the exact same process as I did above for my types of wood, and I'm going to have all of my citations built in too. If you need a third heading, like you're like, well, my IV and my DV, those are two of the things, but like I'm also like, I have this whole other part of my science fair project that it's like a different category. Like you can add as many of these headings as you want as you're doing your research. Like maybe you have a really important control variable that you're not really sure how to control for and you need some more information about. You can add that control variable here too and start doing research for it as well. Now, before you click turn in, you need to make sure that you have checked through this rubric. It's at the bottom of your page. The most important thing is your content. If your research has covered the major components of both the IV and the DV, you know you're done. And that's a hard thing to know if you have completely exhausted it or not, but that's where I'm going to help you. Do your absolute best to answer all of the questions you can think of before turning it in, and I'm going to skim through it and pretend like I'm a judge getting ready to ask you questions, and I'll let you know if you've missed anything critical. Your citations, all you need to do is make sure that you've added your citations to the end. Conventions, please make sure you are in third person. No I, we, or you, or anything like that. Make sure that you've got outline bullets and stuff. I need to go back and fix mine, so I need to add some bullets into mine. I would have lost points on that if I'd clicked turned in. And please, please, please make sure that this is all your own words. There should be absolutely nothing copied and pasted from the internet. I say again, do not copy and paste anything from the internet. If you are doing the works cited page, if you're in honors, at the top of your works cited assignment there's a link to easybib.com. As long as you just keep putting in your websites or your books as you're going along finding information, EasyBib is great because it will build your works cited page for you, but please also make sure you're following the rubric for that assignment as well. If you are struggling with any of this, please go visit a librarian or come see me in office hours. Good luck.